In 2003, two sisters vanished from the quiet town of Maple Hollow, North Carolina. Emma and Lily Carter were only 17 and 15, inseparable, full of plans, and gone without a trace. For years, the town searched, the family waited, and rumors grew like weeds. But sometimes the truth doesn't hide in the dark. It waits, buried in plain sight. This is the story of the Carter sisters, and the secret that haunted Maple Hollow for nearly 2 decades. Maple Hollow, Oregon, 2002. Population 2,347. The kind of town where every mailbox has a familiar name, and every secret travels faster than the wind that crawls down from the Cascades. For years, nothing truly bad ever happened here, until the night Emily and Hannah Reed disappeared. It was October 13th, a Friday night that smelled like rain and bonfire smoke. The annual Harvest Festival had ended early, after a sudden power flicker rippled through town. Witnesses said they'd seen the Reed sisters walking home from the fairgrounds just after 9 p.m. Emily in her red varsity jacket, Hannah trailing behind with a paper cup of cider. They never made it home. Their mother, Laura Reed, called the sheriff's office at 10:43 p.m. Her voice, recorded on the 911 tape, would later play across every local news station. "My girls were supposed to be home by 9:30. The lights are still on. Their jackets aren't here. Something's wrong." Deputies searched the woods behind the fairgrounds that night, flashlights sweeping through pine and fog. They found only one thing, a broken silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon, Hannah's favorite charm. It lay half buried in mud near the creek. By dawn, the sheriff called in volunteers. The entire town came out, farmers, teachers, even the local pastor. They combed every inch of the hollow, calling the girls' names until their voices cracked. No trace, no footprints, nothing but the sound of water and wind. Reporters arrived by afternoon. The Reed farmhouse, once quiet, turned into a maze of camera cables and flashing lights. Laura sat on the porch clutching her daughter's photo, the one from last Christmas, both girls smiling under falling snow. She didn't cry. She just kept saying they wouldn't run away. Emily wouldn't leave Hannah. They're together. They're out there. The investigation quickly tangled. There were rumors about an argument Emily had with her boyfriend, about a stranger's blue pickup seen near the old mill road, about a substitute teacher who left town that weekend. But every lead ran cold. Within 2 weeks, Maple Hollow went silent again. Flyers curled on telephone poles. The search parties stopped. Life moved on. For everyone except the Reeds. For the next year, Laura kept the porch light on every night. She said it helped the girls find their way back. People whispered that she'd lost her mind. But those who'd driven past late at night swore they'd seen 2 shadows at the edge of the woods, standing side by side. Then, almost exactly a year later, a hunter stumbled upon something half buried in moss at the base of Hollow Creek. A shoe. Mud-caked, worn thin, size 7. Inside was a folded photo. 2 girls at the Harvest Festival, arms around each other. Across the back, in faint ink, "We shouldn't have gone back." The discovery reopened everything. Detective Marcus Hale, who'd worked the original case, returned from retirement. He was the kind of man who carried his ghosts in silence. He'd lost his own daughter years ago, so when he looked at the Reed case, he saw more than evidence. He saw unfinished grief. He reopened the files, spread them across his kitchen table. Newspaper clippings, maps, autopsy reports from nearby unsolved. There was a pattern forming. He just couldn't see it yet. And then came the letter, postmarked from Portland, dated exactly 1 year after the disappearance. No return address, just a single line written in shaky cursive. "You stopped looking in the wrong place." Hale didn't tell the press. He drove straight to Maple Hollow the next morning, fog curling around his car as if the forest itself were holding its breath. He didn't know it yet, but reopening that file would unravel secrets the town had buried for decades, and bring to light something far darker than a missing persons case. Detective Marcus Hale parked beside the overgrown trail that led toward Hollow Creek. The morning fog hung low and heavy, swallowing the tree line. Maple Hollow hadn't changed much since the case first broke. Same faded storefronts, same wooden church steeple rising over the pines. Only now, there was a quietness that felt almost deliberate. He walked up the gravel path to the Reed farmhouse. The paint had peeled off in flakes, and the porch light was still on. After 3 years, Laura Reed still kept it burning. She met him at the door, smaller than he remembered, shoulders hunched, hair streaked gray. "You got the letter, too?" she asked before he could even speak. Hale frowned. "You got one?" She nodded and handed him a crumpled envelope. The handwriting was identical to the one he'd received, thin, slanted cursive. Inside, a note on the same line stationery. "I hear them at night. By the creek. The place we used to go, no signature. No address." Hale felt a shiver crawl down his spine. The phrase, "the place we used to go," echoed something from the old witness interviews. He flipped through his memory. There had been talk of a hidden clearing the Reed girls loved as kids. A spot near the old railway line that ran past Hollow Creek. Locals called it the Pines, because of the strange humming sound the trees made when the wind moved through them. Laura's hands trembled as she poured coffee. "People say I'm crazy," she whispered. "They say I'm the one who keeps mailing myself those notes. But I know my girls. They're trying to reach me." Hale didn't respond. He stared out the window at the dark stretch of trees. In all his years as a detective, he'd learned one thing. Sometimes the line between grief and truth wasn't as clear as people wanted it to be. He drove to the Pines that afternoon. The forest was dense, untouched. Fallen needles muffled his footsteps. About half a mile in, the trees opened into a clearing, overgrown but unmistakably familiar from old search photos. He crouched near the creek bed, brushing away leaves. Something metallic glinted beneath the mud. It was a locket, rusted and dented. Inside, 2 faces smiled up at him. Emily and Hannah Reed, the same photo Laura had shown on the porch. But there was something odd scratched into the inside rim. For E&H and always come back. A gift? A message? Or a warning? As Hale slipped the locket into an evidence bag, a branch snapped somewhere behind him. He spun around, flashlight raised. The forest stared back in silence. Later that evening, he visited the old fairgrounds where the girls were last seen. The Ferris wheel was gone, the booths dismantled, but the empty field still carried that strange stillness. He closed his eyes, picturing the scene from the reports. Laughter, music, the smell of cider, and 2 sisters walking into the night. He whispered their names. Emily, Hannah, and then he heard it. Faint, almost like wind through the pines, and a hum. Not mechanical, not animal. A low, human-like tone. He followed the sound to the far edge of the field where the power lines cut through the forest. There, hanging from one of the rusted poles, was something that shouldn't have been there at all. A red varsity jacket, torn and stiff from rain, tangled in the wires. Emily's jacket. The tag inside was intact. Her initials, ER, still visible. Hale's pulse kicked hard. He scanned the base of the pole. Tire tracks, faint but fresh, led into the woods. He radioed the local unit. "I need a perimeter around the old fairground power lines. Get a forensic team here ASAP." When the deputy asked what he'd found, Hale paused before answering. "Proof," he said quietly, "that someone's been keeping this case alive." That night, rain rolled through Maple Hollow again. In the Reed house, Laura sat by the window, clutching her daughter's photo. Somewhere in the distance, thunder echoed, but beneath it, she thought she heard something else. 2 voices, soft, laughing, fading into the trees. She pressed her hand to the glass. "Emily, Hannah?" But the yard was empty. When Hale returned to his motel, he spread the photos across the bed. The locket, the jacket, the letter. Patterns emerged again. The notes always came postmarked from Portland. The handwriting matched an old teacher from the high school, Mr. Leary, who'd abruptly resigned 3 weeks after the disappearance. Hale flipped through the original interview. Mr. Leary had been the last adult to see the girls alive. He'd claimed they left the fair early, said goodbye to him by the apple stand. Now 20 years later, that statement didn't sound like closure. It sounded like a door opening. Hale leaned back, eyes heavy but alert. Outside, wind hissed through the pines like distant whispers. Somewhere out there, the truth was still alive, waiting to be unearthed. The next morning, Detective Marcus Hale sat in his car outside a small blue house on the edge of Portland, Maine. The name on the mailbox read, Leary. Paint flaked off the shutters. A single curtain twitched as if someone had been watching him since he parked. He waited another minute, then walked to the porch and knocked. The man who opened the door was older than Hale expected, late 70s, pale and frail. A faded cardigan hung from his shoulders. His eyes, though, were sharp and wary. "Mr. Leary?" Hale asked, flashing his badge. "Detective Marcus Hale, Cold Case Division. I'd like to ask you a few questions about Emily and Hannah Reed." For a second, something crossed Leary's face. Not surprise exactly, but recognition. Then he stepped aside. "It's been 20 years, he muttered. "I figured someone would come eventually." The house smelled of old paper and damp wood. Piles of books filled every surface. Psychology, education, theology. A half-empty bottle of whiskey sat beside a framed photo of Leary's 1999 homeroom class. 2 smiling girls in the back row, Emily and Hannah. "I already told the police everything," Leary said, lowering himself into an armchair. "They left the fair early. Said they were meeting their mother." Hale sat opposite him. "We both know their mother was at home that night." "You never mentioned the letter you sent her." Leary stiffened. "Letter?" Hale slid a photocopy across the table. The same handwriting as the notes Laura Reed and he had received. "This one was mailed 2 years after they disappeared." Leary stared at it for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. "You think I wrote that?" "I think you know more than you said." The old man rubbed his temples. "You ever lose a student, Detective? Not to death, into something darker, something you can't name?" Hale waited. Leary looked up, eyes glassy. "Those girls, they were different." Emily was cautious, grounded. Hannah, she had this restlessness, always looking beyond this town. She used to say she could feel the woods watching her. He paused, voice shaking slightly. "A week before they vanished, they came to see me after class. They said someone had been following them home from school. A car with no plates. I told the sheriff at the time, and he laughed it off. Said it was probably a prank." Hale leaned forward. "Who else knew?" "No one. They made me promise not to tell their parents. They were scared their father would overreact." "Did you ever see the car yourself?" Leary nodded slowly. "Once. Black sedan, parked near the field by the old substation. I didn't think much of it until—" His voice trailed off. "Until they disappeared," Hale finished. Leary's eyes darted toward the window. "I tried to help," he whispered. "But when the police turned on me, I shut down. I left Maple Hollow because I couldn't stand seeing their faces everywhere. Every night I hear them. I write letters to quiet them, not to scare their mother." For the first time, Hale believed him, at least partly. There was guilt in the man's posture, but not the guilt of a killer. "Who do you think was following them, Mr. Leary?" Leary's jaw tightened. "Someone from the mine. Emily told me they'd seen that same car near the Reed property, near the old quarry entrance. The mine again. Just like the Martinez case decades earlier, Hale thought. Same pattern. Young girls, small town, closed circle, forgotten tunnels beneath everything." "Do you remember anyone specific from the mine?" Leary's eyes flicked to the bookshelf. "There was a man named Conrad Miles, maintenance foreman. Got fired around that time for drinking on the job. Always hanging around the diner where the girls worked part-time. He gave Hannah a charm once. Said it was for protection." Hale's stomach sank. "Do you still have it?" Leary shook his head. "She left it on my desk that last day. I kept it for years, but I threw it out when the nightmares started." Outside, the wind picked up. A hollow moan echoed through the chimney like distant voices whispering. Hale stood. "I'll need to verify your statement." As he turned to leave, Leary said softly, "Detective, they weren't supposed to be together that night." Hale paused. "What do you mean?" Emily was grounded. Only Hannah was supposed to go to the fair, but she begged her sister to come anyway. Why? Leary hesitated. She said she needed Emily to meet someone. A man who said he could help her get out of Maple Hollow. Hale froze. "Did she say his name?" Leary's lips trembled. "She called him Mr. C, that's all I know." When Hale drove back toward town, rain began to fall, slow, cold drops that streaked the windshield like tears. He stopped at a gas station to clear his head and called the state archives. "Run a search," he told the operator. "Conrad Miles, Maple Hollow Mining Company. Employment records, 1998 to 2001. The line crackled. "Give me a minute." When the operator came back, her voice was uneasy. "Detective, Conrad Miles died in 1999 car accident. But there's something else. His brother Caleb still owns property near the old quarry." "Address?" Hale asked. 103 Quarry Road, Maple Hollow. Hale hung up, adrenaline thrumming. 20 years? And suddenly everything pointed back to the same place. Well, the mines, the pines, and the man who might still be alive. He turned the car toward Maple Hollow, headlights slicing through the fog. If Leary was right, the girls hadn't just vanished. They'd gone somewhere that night, following a promise. And whoever Mr. C was, he'd been waiting for them. The road to Quarry Road was a ribbon of cracked asphalt that disappeared into the dense Maine pines. The rain from the previous night had turned the dirt shoulders into slick mud. Marcus Hale's headlights cut through the mist as he followed the winding lane, the woods pressing close on both sides like they were listening. Caleb Miles' house appeared suddenly, a sagging one-story cabin, half swallowed by the forest. A rusted Ford truck sat under a lean-to. A faded sign on the fence read, "Private property. Keep out." Hale parked, stepped out, and felt the damp chill sink through his jacket. He approached the porch, noting the faint smell of oil and old tobacco. When he knocked, it took nearly a minute before the door creaked open. The man who answered looked like time had carved him out of the same wood as his house. Late 60s, beard streaked with gray, eyes small and sharp. A deep scar ran from his temple to his jaw. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice low and gravelly. "Detective Marcus Hale," he said, flashing his badge. "Cold Case Division. I'm looking into the disappearance of Emily and Hannah Reed." The man's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened on the doorframe. "That was a long time ago." "Not long enough," Hale said quietly. "You're Caleb Miles, correct? Brother of Conrad Miles?" Caleb's eyes flicked past Hale toward the road. "Conrad's been dead 20 years, I know. That's why I'm here. I think your brother might have been connected to what happened to the Reed sisters." For a moment, silence filled the space between them. Then Caleb stepped aside. "You'd better come in." The interior was dim, cluttered with old mining tools, hunting gear, and stacks of newspapers. A wood stove hissed in the corner. Hale noticed the framed photo on the mantel. 2 young men in hard hats standing in front of a mining shaft. Conrad and Caleb side by side, smiling. Caleb followed Hale's gaze. "That picture was taken the year before the mine closed," he said. "We both worked maintenance. Hardest job I ever loved." Hale took out his notebook. "Your brother was fired in 2000. Drinking problem, right?" Caleb gave a bitter laugh. "That's one way to put it. Conrad didn't take well to losing the mine. Started spending too much time at Murphy's Diner. The Reed girls worked there back then, didn't they?" Hale nodded. "You ever meet them?" "Sure, sweet girls. Always polite. Conrad talked about them sometimes. Said they reminded him of our little sister." Caleb's voice cracked. "She died when we were kids." Hale leaned forward. "Did he ever mention meeting them outside of the diner?" Caleb's eyes darted away. "He said Hannah asked him about work. She wanted to get out of Maple Hollow. Thought he might know people hiring in Portland. He said he'd help. And Emily? She went along to look out for her sister. Conrad said they were supposed to meet near the quarry that night. He told me he never saw them. But you didn't believe him, Hale said. Caleb exhaled through his nose. He came home that night with mud on his boots. Wouldn't look me in the eye. I knew something was wrong. A week later, he wrecked his truck on Route 6, drunk off his mind. When they pulled him out, he kept saying, "I didn't mean to." They wanted to leave. The words hung heavy in the cabin. Did you tell the police? Hale asked quietly. Caleb gave a hollow laugh. I tried. Sheriff at the time was his friend. Said Conrad was just drunk and grieving the mine closure. They told me to keep my mouth shut. Hale's pulse quickened. You still have his truck? Caleb hesitated. It's in the barn out back. Been sitting there since the day he died. I was going to scrap it, but... He looked down. Couldn't bring myself to. They stepped outside. The barn loomed behind the house, its roof sagging, the smell of oil and decay seeping from within. Caleb unlatched the door and pushed it open with a groan of rusted hinges. The truck sat under a tarp, a 1984 Chevy, once blue, now faded to gray. Dust coated the windows. Hale pulled the tarp aside, his flashlight cutting across the interior. Something glinted beneath the passenger seat. A small metal chain tangled around the seat bolt. He crouched, heart pounding, and freed it carefully. A silver charm, shaped like a tiny heart, dulled with age. The engraving was faint but readable. E.R. Emily Reed. Caleb's face went pale. I didn't know that was there. Hale sealed the charm in an evidence bag. I'll have this tested. It's enough for a warrant to search the property. Caleb swallowed hard. Detective, if you find something out there, don't tell me. I've spent half my life trying not to picture what really happened. Hale looked toward the tree line beyond the barn. The pines swayed softly in the cold wind. Did your brother have access to the old quarry tunnels after they shut down? Yeah, Caleb said. He kept the keys. Said he liked to go down there to clear his head. I always thought he meant to drink in peace. Hale's phone buzzed, a message from the lab. He stepped away to check it. Preliminary result, handwriting match confirmed. Leary's letters same writer as notes found in Reed mailbox, but paper fibers differ. Possible imitation. Someone had copied Leary's handwriting, someone trying to mislead the investigation. He looked up at the tree line again. The wind carried the smell of wet soil and iron. Mr. Miles, he said finally, I need you to stay inside. And don't go near the quarry, Caleb frowned. Why? Because I think that's where your brother buried the truth. By the time Hale returned to the quarry the next morning, the fog had thickened into a pale wall that swallowed sound. The trees around the site were skeletal in the gray light, and the entrance to the old mine looked less like a tunnel and more like a mouth, wide, waiting, and hungry. A pair of crime scene vans idled nearby. The county search and rescue team had arrived an hour earlier, along with 2 forensic techs from the state lab. Hale met them near the rusted gate that read, Maple Hollow Mining Co. Closed since 1999. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Detective Hale, a young tech called out. We found the hatch you mentioned in the original blueprints. It's sealed but not with concrete, timber, and sheet metal. Somebody patched it themselves. Where? Hale asked. 50 yards down the east shaft. They moved through the tunnel, flashlights cutting through decades of dust. The air was cool and heavy, filled with the smell of damp earth and rust. Their footsteps echoed like ghosts. Old warning signs lined the walls, caution unstable structure. No smoking danger, gas pockets. The further they went, the more the mine seemed to hum. A low vibration deep in the rock, as if the earth itself remembered. The sealed hatch was exactly where the blueprint said it would be, a wall of stacked timbers reinforced with iron plates. Someone had nailed them in place hurriedly. Hale ran his hand along the wood. Get the ground-penetrating radar. The tech set up the equipment. The screen flickered with lines and color bands, Empty voids, dense rock, and then a solid mass. Something's behind it, the tech murmured. About 6 feet in, roughly human-sized. Hale took a step back, exhaling. Start clearing it carefully. For the next 2 hours, the sound of hammers and drills filled the mine. The timbers came loose one by one, revealing a narrow alcove beyond. When the last board was pried away, a gust of cold air rushed out, carrying with it the smell of rot and old metal. Inside the alcove lay 2 forms, side by side. Skeletal remains, clothing still faintly clinging to the bones, one wearing a denim jacket, the other a floral print top. Beside them, half buried in dirt, a silver chain tangled around a small plastic hair clip shaped like a butterfly. Hale's chest tightened. Tag everything. Photograph before moving a thing. The forensic photographer stepped forward, camera flashing in rhythmic bursts. Dust floated in the air like ash. A tech whispered, 2 females, teen to early 20s, likely the Reed sisters. Hale crouched closer, shining his light over the bones. The skulls both bore fractures and sharp, deliberate blows. Behind them, embedded in the dirt wall, was something metallic. He brushed away the soil and revealed a rusted tool, the head of a sledgehammer. He didn't speak, just stared at it for a long moment. The tech broke the silence. We'll need to call the county coroner. Hale nodded, voice low. And the lab in Augusta. I want full DNA confirmation. He straightened and looked around the small chamber. Something caught his eye. Faint marks scratched into the rock. He leaned in and traced them with his gloved fingers. The letters were uneven, desperate, carved by hand. Help us, ER. For a moment, everything went silent. The sound of dripping water stopped. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Hale stepped back, his flashlight trembling slightly. Seal the area, he said quietly. No one comes in or out until I say. When he emerged from the tunnel, the daylight hit like a slap. The mist was thicker now, curling around the trees like smoke. Sheriff Lang met him by the vehicles. What did you find? Hale removed his gloves slowly. 2 sets of remains. It's them. Lang's face fell. After 20 years? Yeah, Hale said. But this isn't over. He looked back toward the dark mouth of the mine. Conrad Miles killed those girls, but he didn't act alone. Lang frowned. You got proof of that? Hale pointed toward the distant tree line. Someone sealed that chamber years after he died. The wood's not from 2000. It's newer. Pressure treated, commercially milled. I guess mid-2000s, Lang's brow furrowed. You think Caleb did it? Hale shook his head slowly. Maybe. Or maybe someone else who didn't want this case reopened. The sheriff cursed under his breath. I'll get a warrant for his house. Already in motion, Hale said. But something tells me Caleb Miles isn't our end. He's just another thread. That night, Hale sat alone in his motel room reviewing the photos from the scene. The carved letters. The charm. The sledgehammer. His phone buzzed. A message from the lab in Augusta. Preliminary DNA match confirmed. Remains belong to Emily and Hannah Reed. Hale set the phone down and stared out the window. Outside, Maple Hollow slept under the weight of the fog. Somewhere beyond those trees, the past had been waiting all along, silent, patient, unburied. He whispered to himself. Emily asked for help. Somebody heard her. They just didn't want anyone else to. He leaned back in the chair, exhaustion clawing at him. Then his phone buzzed again. Another message, this one from the department clerk. Detective, you asked about Conrad Miles's accident report. There's something strange. The coroner's signature is missing and the cause of death line is blank. Hale froze. The rain started again outside. Tapping softly against the glass like fingers, he whispered, Conrad Miles didn't die in that crash. Detective Marcus Hale sat in the sheriff's office. The coroner's report spread across the desk like a confession that didn't quite add up. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, throwing pale shadows across the room. No cause of death, Hale said aloud. No toxicology, no signature, no body photo. Just a single burned ID tag labeled Conrad Miles. Sheriff Lang leaned back in his chair. That's impossible. The man's been dead since 2000, has he? Hale asked, sliding a photograph across the table. It was a grainy image pulled from surveillance footage at a truck stop 30 miles outside Portland, taken just 5 years ago. The man in the photo was older, bearded, heavier, but the eyes were the same. Lang frowned. Where'd you get this? From a missing persons report filed in 2019, Hale said. A hitchhiker vanished near the coast. Witnesses described a man who picked him up in a blue Ford truck. Said he called himself Conrad. I cross-checked that report with DMV data. No active licenses under that name, but the truck's VIN number matched a vehicle once registered to Caleb Miles. Lang swore under his breath. So you're saying? I'm saying someone staged Conrad's death, Hale replied. And Caleb might have helped. Lang rubbed his temples. You think the brother's covering for him? Maybe. Or maybe he's just been living with a lie so long he started believing it. Hale stood, gathering the papers. I'm going back to the Miles property. The afternoon light was fading when he arrived at the cabin again. The same rusted truck sat in the driveway, but something felt different. The air heavier, the woods quieter. He knocked once. No answer. Knocked again. Caleb? He called. From inside came a muffled thud. Hale's hand went to his sidearm. He pushed the door open. The cabin was dim, lit only by the glow of a single oil lamp. Papers covered the table. Old mining maps, photos of Conrad, yellowed newspaper clippings about the Reed sisters. And in the middle of it all, Caleb Miles sat slumped in a chair, a revolver on the table beside him. He looked up slowly, his face hollow. You found them, didn't you? Yes, Hale said carefully. Emily and Hannah. Caleb nodded. I knew you would. I was just hoping I'd be gone before you got here. Gone? Hale's eyes flicked to the revolver. You don't need to do that. Caleb gave a weak laugh. You don't understand, Detective. My brother wasn't the monster everyone thinks he was. Hale took a step closer. Then tell me what really happened. Caleb's eyes glistened. Conrad didn't kill those girls. He found them. Hale froze. What do you mean? Caleb rubbed his temples, voice shaking. The night they disappeared, Conrad went to the quarry like he told me. But when he got there, the girls were already dead. He said there was someone else, a man in a deputy's jacket, loading something into a truck. When the man saw Conrad, he panicked, swung at him. Conrad fought back, but he ran before he could see his face. Why didn't he go to the police? Caleb looked at him with tired eyes. He tried. He went to Sheriff Miller, the same man who told me to shut up about it later. Hale's stomach dropped. Miller covered it up. Caleb nodded. He said if Conrad talked, they'd pin it on him. So Conrad ran, faked his death in that truck crash. Miller made sure the report looked real. Burned ID, no body left to check. Hale's mind raced. Where is he now, Caleb? Caleb's lips trembled. He's been living off-grid, south of the ridge near the old power line cabins. He swore he'd never come back unless someone reopened the case. Hale stepped closer. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I thought if I kept quiet, the ghosts would stay buried. Caleb's eyes filled with tears. But they never did. Before Hale could respond, a sound echoed from outside, the crunch of gravel under boots. He turned toward the window. 2 headlights glowed faintly through the trees. Is anyone else supposed to be here? Hale whispered. Caleb shook his head. No. Hale moved to the side of the window, peering out carefully. A truck had pulled into the drive, dark blue, mud-caked, engine idling. The driver's door opened, but no one got out. Stay here, Hale said. He stepped out onto the porch, his gun drawn. This is Detective Hale. Step out of the vehicle. The truck's engine revved, once, twice, and then cut off. The driver's door creaked open and a figure climbed out slowly. Tall, broad-shouldered, gray beard, weathered jacket. Even under the dim light, Hale recognized the face from the surveillance photo. Conrad Miles, Hale said quietly. The man smiled faintly. Took you long enough? Put your hands where I can see them. Conrad didn't move. You found them, didn't you? My girls? They weren't your girls, Conrad, Hale said. They were victims. Conrad shook his head. Victims of the wrong man. He took a step forward, hands raised. You think I don't know what they say about me? That I'm a monster? I tried to save them. Miller killed them, because they saw him dumping something near the quarry. He was smuggling scrap copper out of the mine, stealing from the company. They caught him. Hale's pulse thudded in his ears. You have proof? Conrad looked at the ground. I did, in the truck. But Miller torched it before I could run. He said if I ever showed my face again, he'd finish the job. Then why come back now? Because Miller's dead, Conrad said quietly. And I thought maybe, finally, I could tell the truth. The sound of sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Lang's deputies racing toward the cabin. Conrad sighed. Too late now, though, isn't it? Not if you come with me, Hale said. Tell your story, we'll check it. Conrad gave a hollow smile. You really think Maple Hollow wants the truth? Before Hale could move, a single shot cracked through the trees. Conrad stumbled backward, clutching his chest. His body hit the mud with a thud. Hale spun, shouting, Hold fire! But no one answered. He dropped beside Conrad, pressing his hand to the wound. The old man's eyes flickered. Who fired? Hale demanded. Conrad, who's out there? Conrad coughed, blood spilling from his lips. His voice came out as a whisper. Check. Miller's file. He wasn't alone. And then he went still. The sirens grew louder. Hale looked toward the tree line, scanning for movement. But all he saw was mist. Someone had silenced the only man who could expose the truth. And whoever it was still out there. The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. Detective Marcus Hale stood under the dripping eaves of the Miles cabin, staring at the patch of ground where Conrad's body had been. The soil was still dark, the outline still visible. They'd taken him to the morgue 2 nights ago. Caleb hadn't said a word since. The official report would say, officer involved shooting during attempted arrest. But Hale knew better. Someone had been waiting in those woods. Someone who knew Conrad was back. Someone who didn't want the truth dug up. He'd barely slept since that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the muzzle flash in the fog, and Conrad's last words echoing in his head. Check Miller's file. He wasn't alone. So that's what Hale did. The sheriff's office archives were old school. Steel cabinets, dust-thick files, the faint hum of a flickering ceiling fan. Hale unlocked the drawer marked Miller Sheriff, 978-2003, and started digging. The man had been Maple, Hollow's longest-serving lawman before his death in 2004, officially, heart attack in his sleep. Unofficially, the kind of death that ends 100 unanswered questions. At first, the files were what you'd expect. Routine reports, property disputes, accident logs. But then Hale found a folder marked Reed Case. He flipped it open. Inside were copies of the missing person reports for Emily and Hannah Reed, filed June 2000. But attached to the back, in paper-clipped handwriting, was something else. A typed confession, unsigned, dated July 3, 2000. They saw what we were doing at the quarry. We didn't mean for it to happen, but they started screaming. Miller said to make it look like an accident. I only helped move them. I swear I didn't kill them. R. Hale's heart started pounding. Fursunt as in Deputy Ray Hollis. He remembered the name from an old roster. Hollis had served under Miller until 2001, then abruptly resigned and left town. The file said he'd moved north. No forwarding address. Until Hale checked the local property records. Raymond Hollis had bought a parcel of land under a false name in 2008. A hunting cabin, 20 miles outside town, the same direction Conrad had said Miller used to dump copper. By dusk, Hale was driving down the old timber road, the radio silent except for static. The pines closed in around him like a tunnel. When he finally saw the cabin, small slanted roof, wood smoke curling from the chimney, His stomach turned. Someone was home. He parked far enough back that the engine noise wouldn't carry, then walked the last quarter-mile on foot. The rain had turned the ground slick. Each step sounded too loud. When he reached the porch, he saw a shape moving inside, a man older, balding, wearing a faded sheriff's jacket. Hollis. Hale steadied his hand on his gun, then pushed the door open. Raymond Hollis. Detective Hale, State Police. We need to talk. The man froze. For a long moment, only the sound of the fire filled the room. Finally, Hollis turned, and his face drawn, eyes pale and sunken. I figured someone would come after Conrad died. So you admit you knew he was alive? Hale said. Hollis sighed. I knew he wasn't the one who killed those girls. Miller was. I just didn't have the guts to stop him. Then why help cover it up? Because I was 24 and scared, Hollis said, his voice trembling. Miller ran everything in this town. The mine, the cops, the money. He said those girls would ruin us if they talked. Said it'd be a mercy to make it quick. Hale's jaw tightened. And you helped him. I helped him bury them, Hollis whispered. By the old quarry. We thought no one would find them. But Conrad saw the truck lights and followed us. Miller wanted him dead too, but I faked the report. Said his truck burned out. I thought it'd keep him safe. Hale took a step forward. Then who killed Conrad 2 nights ago? Hollis's face twitched. You still don't get it, do you? He gestured to a framed photo on the mantel. An old group picture. Sheriff Miller, a handful of deputies, and Sheriff Lang standing right beside them. Hale's stomach dropped. Lang? Hollis nodded. Miller's protege. He was there that night. He helped move the bodies after I left. Said he'd handle it. And when Conrad came back, he looked toward the floor. Lang made sure he didn't talk. The sound of tires crunching outside made both men turn. Headlights swept across the window, a sheriff's SUV. Hale's blood ran cold. Stay here, he said. He stepped out onto the porch as Lang climbed out of the truck, gun in hand, rain sheeting down around him. Marcus, Lang called. You don't want to do this. Drop it, Sheriff, Hale said, weapon raised. I know everything. Miller, the Reeds, Hollis, all of it. Lang gave a sad, tired smile. You think anyone will believe you? You're an outsider. I've been here 30 years. This town bleeds my name. Hale's finger tightened on the trigger. You killed Conrad Miles. I protected Maple Hollow, Lang snapped. Those girls were poking around in something they didn't understand. Miller's gone. But if people start digging again, this town dies. The mine, the families, everything. So you decided who lives and who dies, Hale said, voice low. Lang's hand twitched. You'll never prove it. A thunderclap boomed overhead. Then 2 shots. One cracked through the rain. The other answered a half-second later. Silence. Hale staggered back, his side burning. But Lang was already on the ground, blood pooling beneath him. Hollis stood behind Hale in the doorway, smoking revolver trembling in his hand. I couldn't let him kill another man for it, Hollis said quietly. By morning, it was over. Lang's death was ruled self-defense. Hollis turned himself in and gave a full confession, leading them to the Reed sisters' remains near the quarry. Their graves were marked under the old oak tree, the one Conrad had carved their names into 25 years ago. Caleb Miles left town that week. Said he'd never come back. Hale didn't blame him. Months later, Hale returned once more to Maple Hollow. The woods were green again, the cabin empty. But sometimes when the wind moved through the pines, it almost sounded like whispering, like 2 young voices laughing faintly in the distance. He stood by the quarry, hat in hand, and murmured quietly, You're free now, Emily. You too, Hannah. The leaves rustled in reply, and then there was only the sound of rain, falling softly on the forgotten ground of Maple Hollow.